obviously, my main memory of Beijing is beforehand when Bolt was doing his press conference. You might have even been there, but it was in a sort of Chinese restaurant. Surprising Beijing, but it was a restaurant come nightclub, and he was there with the international head of Puma and Paolo Nutini, the singer. And it was really odd. So there were these three people on the stage, and there was people asking Bolt questions because he just broke the world record, hadn't he? It's the world record in New York. But anyway, so people are asking Bolt the questions. Then there's a business journalist asking the head of Puma the questions, and then there's a couple of people asking Paolo Nutini, who was quite new, very new at the time, and he just got a record. And I couldn't work out why he was there until I realised his single was called New Shoes.
It was very tenuous, wasn't it? A connection between them all.
And it's purely down to that. I remember somebody saying to him, Paolo, what's your song New Shoes about? And him just sort of saying, shoes. Shoes. And that was it. So I liked him ever since. But it shows how things have changed, because I remember going to a back room with Bolt, and we were the only two people there, and he was showing me his golden boots. He said golden boots spikes that he was going to wear. And a couple of years later, there'd be about 30 PR people and sort of managers and agents all around him. But back then, it was just me and him. It was great. So yeah, that was good. And then obviously when he went and did that, the world record in the Olympic final, I just thought, wow, it's just something off the scale. And it was also my first sort of experience of having to write a lot of words about very little, sort of 1,200 words on a 10-second race, which is quite hard. I mean, the deadlines, depends where you are, but the London deadlines would end up being the worst. I remember that race in London, fast forwarding, but that started at 10 to 10. The deadline on the national newspaper is 10 o'clock in the evening. So literally you had no time to write this. So everybody's pre-writing their stories, assuming Bolt's going to win, but with a nagging fear that maybe he won't, or he'll just, get DQ'd or something. And then you have literally a few minutes to write a top for the story. So that was quite something. We actually had a journalist, Giles Corran, who's probably, people might know him from the TV and stuff. He went down to write a piece, which was basically write 1,000 words in 10 minutes, which was the whole crux of his piece. I don't know if he pre-wrote any of it, but it was quite hard. But yeah, Beijing. But going back to Beijing, yeah, that was it was all about Bolt, I think, for me, that one. Yeah. I just have that vivid memory, and it wasn't great for the Brits. She was Chrissy, but yeah, it was good. And yeah, it was my first experience of how long the opening ceremony goes on for as well.
Oh, did you go to the opening ceremony as well? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Lots of drumming and ribbons.
Yeah. How do you report on an event like that?
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the opening ceremonies.
No. Let's get on with the sports. Yeah. Let's stick with Bolt while we're on Bolt. Tell me about your interactions with Bolt over the years and how that. Did you ever see the real Bolt? Do you think? I mean, he seemed quite an open book, really.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was as you saw, wasn't he? I think he hit a lot. I mean, he was such a cool, calm dude, really, wasn't he? And yet he could explode into this, incredible athlete over short periods. I mean, yeah, I think got to see him in certain situations. The one I always remember, which was a press conference at London, and he'd always said once he'd won, he had to back it up to become a legend. Yeah, and so when he won in London again, backed up Beijing, he I think some people thought that might be it for him. I don't know why, because he's still young. And anyway, he said, as all the journalists were getting up, and there's hundreds of journalists in a Bolt press conference after an Olympic final, he said, "Can everybody sit down again, please? I've got something to announce." And everybody's thinking, "Wow, what's he going to say? what's this all about? So everybody files back in to their seats, takes forever, and sits down. And Bolt just looks at everybody and says, "I am a legend, bask in my glory." And then he walked out. No, I am a living legend. That was it. I am a living legend, bask in my glory. And I thought that was one of the best things I'd ever seen, which kind of sums him up, I think. Huge person. And yeah, from anyone else, it would just sound like terrible arrogance and cocky, but he delivered it with such a sort of swagger and a bit of charm. Yeah, it's a lot of time for him. I was lucky enough. I think one of the great things I did with Bolt was I went to see him run in Jamaica, in Kingston. And that was like being at a religious sermon or something. It was just absolutely astonishing.
It's a different crowd over there, isn't it? Apparently, it's quite boisterous, isn't it? In
Kingston. It's a party, and it was great. And I don't remember anything about the race. I can't remember who he was racing against, but it was just the fact he was running in Jamaica. And it was something else. There was I don't know if I should tell you this, but because I'm not sure. Is there a watershed on your
That's fine. No, go for it. I'll have the last guess was David Gillick, and he was quite Irish at times with his language.
I remember, and I've forgotten the name of the guy. Which crikey. Anyway, it was. I remember watching Bolt, and there was an old Rastafarian guy at the back of the stand, and he's puffing away on a spliff, and and nobody batting an eyelid. And eventually, there's people gathering around him, and I sort of asked someone, "Who is that guy?" And said, "I've forgotten who it was," which shames me, but he was an Olympian from the '60s, anyway.
Right. Okay.
Pretty well-known Jamaican runner. And I thought, that's interesting, and just left it at that. And then I realised he was one of the people that a university was taking blood from to do a study on why Jamaicans so, good at running. It was all the whole sprint factory sort of era. And I thought, blimey, I'm not sure they should be taking blood from the bloke who's puffing away on his. I'm not sure what they're going to find. But yeah, it was an interesting place for sure. It was we went to his club. Bolt had his club by that point where he was selling. You could get a Bolt burger with Bolt sauce in the Bolt club. It was all fun.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah,
I think that might have been another trip because we went a couple of times. We also went before the Olympics. Everybody, all the journalists, managed to wangle their sports editors to pay for a trip to Jamaica to go and do the Bolt sort of story. That was the trip where the Daily Mail tried to break into Bolt's house, sort of by climbing the wall, which was quite a story as well. It might have damaged relations, I think, with Bolt and for quite a while, that one. But he was different gravy, as they say, and there's not been anybody like him since. I don't think there'll be anybody like him in the future.
No, I mean, how important is it that sport has that sort of, golf has its Tiger Woods, he was, and football's Ronaldo's and Messi's, but how important is it to have that figurehead?
I think it depends a bit on the sport, and I think for athletics it's absolutely vital, which is a struggle, I think, because you would always sports editors are not that interested in athletics. They know about Usain Bolt. And that would be a sell. And part of that was his achievements, and part of it was the way he did those achievements, with the personality. So if you got someone like that, it's gold dust. And I remember talking, to Seb Coe about it, and Seb saying, "We've always had stars, and we'll survive." We had Michael Johnson, we've had Daly, whoever the biggest star would be of an era, and we've always managed to move on. But I just don't think you can replace someone like that. I think he's a once in a lifetime, once in a century sort of athlete. He's Muhammad Ali, basically.
He is Muhammad Ali, yeah.
And you can't. They are important, and it's a struggle now with athletics, honestly, to sort of bring it to a wider audience. And it's not because there's not great athletes, and it's not because there's not great personalities, because you've got people like Karsten Warholm, who amazing personalities, but don't know. It's just sometimes it's the event as well, isn't it? The 100 meters. It's just such a glamour event. The 400 hurdles is less so. So yeah, I think it is important for athletics, and I think that's where it'd be great. I'm getting to a very long discussion about access to athletes and that sort of thing, and how it's got worse, and really they're not helping the wider sport, I don't think, by being like that. Bolt was always available. He'd do press conferences. He sold the sport. He might not have done much since, which is a bit disappointing. But yeah, I think you do need people. You do need those stars, especially in sports that are not football. Put it that way. They can get away with it.
Yeah. What I mean, just divert a bit here. What do editors say to you about athletics? I mean, what's the feeling around the sports desk about the sport?
Well, I mean, it's largely personality led. So if you had, well, let's say next week, so you got a London Marathon. Okay, that London Marathon's a big event, but it's a lot easier to sell when you've got, say, Eilish McColgan on the back of a great year like last year with her backstory and mum and everything, or maybe Mo's farewell or whatever it may be, than not being there, which might be wrong and what have you, but it's quite hard to sort of get interest outside of the major championships, which there will always be that interest. But I'm trying to think. I mean, for instance, they had the European Indoor Championships, the other week in Istanbul, and not every newspaper sent to that, which would have been probably unthinkable at one time. It'd just be a standard thing. So yeah, it is hard. And Diamond League meet, when Bolt was running, and or Jess was sort of around, although she probably wouldn't do many Diamond Leagues. Those sort of athletes you could follow around and go to Diamond League events. Now it's harder, although in this country, it's a godsend that Keely Hodgkinson's arrived, because then you've got an athlete who's not only brilliant, but again got a bit of a spark, bit of personality, and yeah, she could be a real asset in selling the sport in the UK, I think.
Good. Let's go. But you mentioned Mo and Jess there, so we obviously got to talk about London 2012, and that's for a journalist, that's an athletics correspondent, that's a once in a lifetime event as well, isn't it? I mean, did you feel privileged for that whole duration?
I do feel privileged. I mean, you whatever you're doing. I mean, I went to the Masters Golf last week, and you can get blasé about it, and then you see people queuing up and saying it's a once in a lifetime trip and spent thousands of pounds to get here and that, and you think, well, you're getting in for free. So yeah, I do feel privileged, and London particularly, because I tried to get tickets for various things for the kids, and it was great. We went to a hockey match, went to a handball thing, but it wasn't going to Super Saturday or things like that. So to go to that and to be working there, because it does give you a buzz. And I thought we had it all pretty much planned until Greg sort of weighed up and didn't get in the way. I don't mean that, but it made it more complicated. But what a night that was. It was great, and I think particularly with Jess, because you sort of got to know her reasonably well over the last sort of. I remember we did some columns with her. I remember in Beijing when she'd missed out because she'd broken her ankle. So we're doing pieces with her back then, and then sort of following her through for 4 years, with the greats, Higher Berlin, sort of becoming world champ. That was great, and you sort of, you'll know this, but there's these sort of old, sort of unwritten sort of rules about no cheering in the press box and that sort of thing. Everyone's got to be uber professional and all that sort of thing.
It's almost a competition to see who can be the most professional by being the most miserable and rising above all the excitement.
Exactly, the most miserable. But I do remember getting excited when Jess was coming down that home straight. For that